Thank you for joining us for another opportunity of fellowship with This Is My Story, testimonies that move the soul. There's so much that can be said about families. Families have been a part of the fabric of the United States for quite some time. In fact, they've had a number of sitcoms that are based on families. I'm sure you recall a few of them. How about My Three Sons or Father Knows Best, even the Brady Bunch. And then for some of us, it may have been the Cosby Show back in the 80s. No matter which family you identify with, there's a few things that seem to automatically go with it. You automatically think of one that may be favored, perhaps according to the siblings. And then there's the one that may be the troublemaker, or at least the one that gets by with it. And then there's the story of mom and how everyone loves mom, and maybe she might be the one with the firm hand. The theme of the family has been around for a long time. And as we mentioned last night on our Zoom call where we come together for double blessings, it was shared how precious family is now. We've come to appreciate that even more these past few months during this season of COVID. But family is not a new idea, nor is it a novel idea. Because see, when the world was created and God said, it is good, and then he said, it is very good, that family, that unit that was created before sin was a part of something that had his special fingerprint. I'd like to think that our guests today have had the wonderful experiences of having God's fingerprint on their lives, the fingerprint of his leading and the fingerprint of his favor, the fingerprint of going through the hurdles as a family. Well, today we have Elder George Sampson, and many of you know him. If you don't know him, you've heard him. The midnight cry is almost really associated directly with him. And he takes us into a whole nother experience when he sings it, especially when it's at a memorial or a funeral. It offers encouragement. But he embodies so much more than that, being one of the senior members of this family. And then also we welcome today Dr. Carlton Sampson. Dr. Sampson is also here in Southern California, and while he may be closer toward the younger member of the Sampson family, he too recognizes that there is absolutely no doubt that the two of them are related. Well, we get a chance to find out a little bit about this and so much more today. I've known Dr. Carlton Sampson since I was a young lady preparing to go to Oakwood. And then I had the pleasure years later to meet his older brother. Whoever you identify with, whether it's their siblings or younger family members or the twins that are driving Dr. Carlton Sampson crazy, it doesn't matter where you relate with them. At the end of the day, they're family and we're their extended family. So I love to welcome, but today it's an exceptional privilege to welcome both of these men to our afternoon fellowship of This Is My Story. And it indeed is their story. And I guarantee you, it will move your soul. Welcome, Elder Sampson and Dr. Carlton Sampson. What a delight it is to have you for our guest today. And the time is now yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for the invitation to talk for a few minutes about some experiences our family has had where the Lord has really shown himself and shown out. And we thank you for the opportunity to speak to that and to give you some insight into our family. Since I'm not only one of the older brothers, I am the eldest of the family. I am the number one son. The story of the Sampson family began on a July day in the hamlet of Swans Creek, North Carolina, just outside of Fayetteville, where George Sr. was born to Lula and Connie Sampson. And these were folk who were farming and picking cotton and doing anything they could to scrape by to make a living for their family. A month or so later, in the town of Fayetteville, Mary Helen Taylor was born in August of the same year. And they grew up for most of their elementary and primary school days not knowing each other at all. As you might remember, or as you might probably already know, back in that day, although there was a high school near where my father was born, because it was all white, he was not allowed to attend it. And there was one Black high school in Fayetteville, the E.E. Smith High School. So both my parents went to E.E. Smith. They were attending high school there together, but still did not know each other. And the how they met story goes something like this. My mother was very active in her church as a youth leader, and she had been asked to put together a concert for the young people at her church. Her mother was a serious Methodist. Her father, Church and God. Down south, people tended to stay in the church they were raised in even after they married. They seldom joined each other's churches. That is, until they became Seventh-day Adventists. Then they came to the same. So she had heard of this young man named George who could sing. And so she got in touch with him and asked him if he would sing on the concert. He so agreed. And this event sparked the beginning of the Sampson family as it is presently configured. He sang for the program. They immediately had an attraction to each other. And back in that day, today he would have sent her a text, but back in that day, there was only letters and personal meetings that cemented their relationship. They began to talk to each other and they began to feel that they really had a special thing going between them. Well, Dad, they both graduated in the same year from E.E. Smith, and Dad went out to A&T College in Greensboro, and Mom went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. And Dad was a little bit anxious. School was okay, but he wasn't really that cool with it. His idea and his goal was to use that voice that he had to bust the entertainment industry wide open. So at about 18 or 19, he left school and went straight to New York City, which was then at that time the entertainment capital of the world. And he began to fulfill his dream of being a singer. He joined some organizations that were singing in clubs around Harlem, and he did that for some time. But he began to have a yearning and a longing for the love of his life. He missed her very much. And so he wrote her a letter. And in that letter, he said, "Would you please come to New York so we can get married?" And my mother agreed. She went to New York. They married. My father had an aunt that lived in Harlem on 116th Street. And they stayed with her. We called her Aunt Annie. And Mom and Dad stayed with her. And yours truly came along during that period, being the firstborn. 2 days after my mother's birthday, after her 20th birthday, I was born there in New York City. So that was the beginning of the Sampson family as it is now configured. As many people know, some may not, there are 12 of us. There were 12 of us born to my parents. The story of the Sampsons is one that involves deep faith in God, a sense that all things are possible if you only believe, a teaching that anything can be accomplished if you put your mind to it. One of my mother's favorite sayings: if a job is once begun, never quit it till it's done, was one of her favorite sayings. And so the family, we were there in New York City. My parents were not Adventists at the time. But when I was about, my guess is maybe 4, a literature evangelist came by the apartment in the Bronx, 1176 Boston Road, where Boston Road and Jackson Avenue come together in New York City. And he appealed to my parents with some books, but he felt that he had a possible converts among my parents. My father, although he loved to sing, he was a little bit put out by the corruption and the things that went on in the entertainment world. If you may or may not know this, if you look back at history, there was rampant drug use, alcoholism, a lot of immoral living. And my father had been raised by a holiness mother. And you know, the holiness, they're serious, they don't play. And so he was very uncomfortable with this. And when the gentleman started talking about things religious, he felt that he had some folk here who would be interested. I want you to know that brother came to my parents for a year and a half, almost 2 years, every week until he convinced them to come to church. I remember his name from then, Brother Bramwell. I finally met some of his grandchildren later in life. And unfortunately, there was some animosity on my mother's side of the family about Seventh-day Adventists, because one of my grandfather's cousins sold off a piece of property to some slick talking gentlemen for a little bit of money without getting permission from the rest of the family. She really legally shouldn't have done it, but did it. And they were angry with her because that property is now the Fayetteville International Airport. And on that property, there is a 1-acre cemetery that they had to give back to the family. So our family cemetery is on the International Airport grounds because they didn't want to hear about Adventism. But my parents saw the light. And when I was maybe 5, I don't remember how old, they became members of the church. My father was very gung-ho. He had always been involved as a youth worker. My mother had too. He got involved with the church. He was so impressed with the health message that he opened a health food store. It was before health food was very popular, so he couldn't do very well at it, but he had the right spirit. We had soy milk and we had all the things that were happening. Back then, soy milk was powder, so it was kind of difficult. But the family struggled for some years, early years. Dad, when he stopped singing, he began to press clothes. He became a dry cleaner, and he pressed clothes, and that worked for a while. I was born, my sister Paula was born, brother Jimmy was born. And before my sister Gwen came along, my father decided that New York was not a very safe place. So he moved the family from New York City back to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is where he and my mother were from. There were a couple of reasons for it. My maternal grandmother had what they then thought was tuberculosis, but which we later figured out was probably emphysema, because when they kicked her out of the sanitarium and brought her home, none of us got tuberculosis. And as you know, it's one of the most contagious diseases around. So we think it was emphysema, and she died at a very early age. So we went back to North Carolina, and Dad worked there for a while. And I don't want to take too much time. We Sampsons can go on and on and on. The story is long. How long I've been going? Give me a time frame.
It's been going for about 15 minutes.
Okay, I got a few more minutes. So we came down to Fayetteville, and a church had been established there, believe it or not, in 1919, before my father was even born. The Seventh-day Adventist Church in Fayetteville was founded, Black Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is amazing. And it was named for Elder Abney, which is Elder Cleveland's father-in-law. Abney Chapel SDA Church, and they had a church school. I had gone to the church school in New York, in Brooklyn, at Bethel. You're looking at a guy who never set foot in a public school until he finished college. First grade through college graduation was all in an Adventist school. I think I might have gone to kindergarten in the neighborhood, but that was it. And I went to Bethel. Back then, kids could ride the subway by themselves. Walter Ortiz was a little older than me. And so my parents assigned him to see me to school and back. And we used to ride the subway by ourselves. I won't get into how many times we played hooky, but and we were in his apartment with his father's testimonies to the church and all that stuff piled up, and the train tracks going around the living room. We got caught doing that a couple of times. it didn't seem to have a long-term effect on either one of us. So I praise the Lord for that. Anyway, we came to Fayetteville, and we had both our sets of grandparents were in Fayetteville. My mother's family lived up on Evans Hill in Fayetteville, and my father's family lived down on the old Wilmington Road, which was not too far from the church. So we attended that school. I attended there through 10th grade, and then went to Pine Forge Academy from there. The Fayetteville experience was fascinating because all of my, like I said, both my maternal and maternal cousins were all there. And we got to meet and know that family very well. After I got to Pine Forge, we still hold the record for the family that had the greatest number of children to attend Pine Forge Academy, which is all 12 of us attended Pine Forge Academy. And I'll lead into Carlton. I'll let him talk about this later. But when we were ready to take Carlton to school, to Pine Forge, and Pine Forge became just a matter of fact that everybody was going to go. And we got ready to take Carlton to school. We got to the school, and Pine Forge, as poor as they were, they said, "Boy, this is the 9th Sampson. The 8's been the largest number we've ever had. This is the 9th Sampson. We're going to give him a full scholarship." And so they gave him a scholarship. And so that meant my sister that was after him, who wasn't scheduled to come to the next year, was able to stay. We said, "Well, since Carlton's got a scholarship, Renee, do you want to stay?" And she said yes. And so we said, "We'll send you a suitcase. We know you don't have clothes. We'll send you a foot locker with your clothes." So the Lord bless. The thing I need to say about my parents is that they were fully and completely dedicated to God, and completely and fully dedicated to the education and the formal training and the spiritual development of their children. This was their primary goal. We didn't realize that at the time what was really happening until it was happening, that we were being prepared to live in this world and to try to live our lives according to God's will for us. And although they were neither raised Adventists, they were both raised quite spiritually, and which led into them becoming members of the Adventist Church. I think our family was put together and put out front so that we could encourage other people that no matter what your station, no matter how poor you come from, no matter what it is that you think is going to hold you back in life, if you keep your hand in God's hand, if you will follow the advice, counsel of those who've gone before, if you will attach yourself to people who are going someplace, then you too will end up someplace. So, we'll go back and forth a little, but I wanted to give that kind of an introduction. And Carlton, as you have stated, let me just give you the breakdown. George first, Paula second, Jimmy, Gwen, Reggie, Alan, Vernetta, Luval, Carlton, Michael, Sonia. So my baby sister you saw, she and I are the oldest and the youngest. And there's just under 21 years between our ages. So when God said multiply and replenish the earth, my parents listened. And again, they did what God told them to do. And so here we are. Carlton?
Yeah, well, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Well, it's a good thing they did carry that on, because otherwise I might not be here if they didn't continue on.
That's
If
right.
they stopped at 5 or 6, we would not be having this conversation.
There you go.
Thank you, Debbie, and everyone who's on for allowing us to share our parents and our family story. To me, this is my parents' story. And this is the Sampson story is absolutely and without a doubt, it's a love story. It's completely a love story. It's the love between George Henry Sampson and Mary Helen and their relationship. And it's the love story between the relationship that they had with God, that relationship. And then it's the relationship of the love relationship that the siblings had amongst each other. And if anyone wants to ask what's the secret to our family, the secret is love. It starts with love and it ends with love. And it's the kind of love that that doesn't allow anything to stop it from being shared. So as George shared my parents' love story about how they actually met and got together, um, you have to remember what time, what era that was, where there were no people didn't really have telephones. Like he said, my father had to send a letter to ask her to marry him, and she agreed. My parents grew up in the hardcore Jim Crow South.
Mhm.
See, a lot of you may not know that Fayetteville, North Carolina, to this day, still has the slave auction blocks in the middle of town where you can walk by and see it. As a matter of fact, during the Black Lives Matter movement, they set that thing on fire.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, but it's still there because it's stone, so it didn't get completely destroyed. But this is the environment that the love and the relationship between my parents when it originated. That's the environment that it originated in. And I just want to say that I am so proud of them because they had the courage in a day and age, not like today. Today, if somebody says I'm moving to Seattle or I'm going to Canada, or even if you're going to Britain, you're moving because you already have a job and a position and you know exactly, how you're going to survive in that new environment. My parents, before the civil rights movement, had the courage to look at North Carolina, realize it wasn't the best for their kids. And so that what they would do is they would move north and survive. And when they couldn't survive, they moved back home, regroup, move back north. Eventually, that formula resulted in us ending up in the north for the long haul. But some of my siblings, as George can tell you, some of them were born in North Carolina. And I myself, I'm a Northerner. I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in Manhattan. And for me, coming along, not being the firstborn, not being the eldest, I mean, I'm supposed to have some kind of middle child problem, but I don't. just, it just never affected me. My parents had a way of making every child feel special. I don't care what number you were in the family. If you ask them, they'll be like, "Well, I don't know. I thought I was mommy's favorite. I thought I was daddy's favorite." I know if you ask George, he thinks he was the favorite. Or you ask me, I'll go, I'm sure I was one of the favorites, or the favorite. But that love that we're talking about, that they had for each other, which allowed them to have 12 children. As you know, one of the digs amongst Black families is that, they don't stay together once times get tough, once there's too many kids, the father or somebody decides to step away from that situation to save themselves. And remarkably, my parents, despite the challenges of all the children that they had, despite the systemic financial racism that existed at the time, which only allowed them to earn a limited amount of money, they found a way not only to cherish us with love, but also to feed and house us, and then to eke out. I don't know how they sent George and Paula and Jimmy to Christian schools at that time. It's simply a miracle. I mean, it's an absolute miracle. Their faith in God and their faith that He would come to their rescue, and that happened so many times that that motivated my father. Many of you may not know, but of course that relationship motivated him once he became Adventist to not only open a health food store, but eventually Daddy became a lay minister. And just since we're on that, he became a lay minister up in the Hudson Valley area of New York State. And Daddy actually he put up tents. We spent summers in tents, having tent efforts. And after the efforts, he would rent a storefront, and all of us can remember either being the song leader or the usher or doing something in the service to advance to advance the gospel. And he's credited literally as a lay minister with starting 3 churches in that area, one in Kingston, New York, one in Poughkeepsie, New York, and when I came along, the one in Beacon, New York.
Let me add something to that, Carlton. Yeah, those were interesting times. My father, as I stated earlier, was always active in the church. And when he came back up to New York, he got hooked up with several pastors who were in Ellenville and Kingston and Poughkeepsie, New York, and he was working with those men. And he made a commitment that he would do all he could. Now, my father at that time was a dry cleaner. He was pressing clothes. For a period of time, he owned his own cleaners. But after he would work, he would throw us in the station wagon, and we would go to whatever tent. He said to the conference, "You give me the tent, the chairs, and all the equipment I need, and I'll run evangelistic meetings." Now, this is a man who didn't go to Oakwood. His only Oakwood experience was he was there during one summer when my mother was getting teaching credentials back in the 50s. He took her down for her teaching credential. But he had this yearning to spread God's word. And it's really remarkable what he was able to accomplish. I myself spent many a night at the tent, because when you're the tent master, you can't leave because somebody will come steal the chairs, they'll steal the PA system, they'll do all, and we had some hair-raising experiences there. And I know that only angels kept us. My brother Jim and I were there one night, and these guys came and they were going to do us in, but they kept hesitating, and we didn't know why. And so we kind of, we acted like we were bad, and you better not come in here. We were scared to death. So the next morning, some people that were friendly with us came through, said, "Yeah, I heard about those guys that were harassing you guys last night, trying to take your stuff." We said, "Yeah, that was kind of rough." Said, "But they want to know who those other people were with you." who, who were those other people with you? We said, "Thank you, Jesus. God sent his angels to show up." So those folk thought they saw a bunch of people and they got out of there. So I mean, it just shows you how God blesses your efforts. And after Dad, he would do the tent effort, and then Elder Humphrey, who was pastor of Ephesus at the time in New York, came up and formalized everything. And from that, the Poughkeepsie, the Black Seventh-day Adventist Church in Poughkeepsie had closed down when we moved there. It was non-existent. And because of Dad's efforts, that church today is still thriving.
So once again, the amazing thing is that love relationship that I'm talking about between my parents and God. I mean, it really was on display in a very tangible way for each of us. Like George said, I mean, we would, in the summer times, it was play during the day, but in the afternoon, pack up, get ready, jump in the car, drive to the tent. Everybody had their task in the tent, whether you were whatever it was that your job was, and it started early. I mean, at 12 and 13, I was the song leader for the tent effort. I was expected to lead the songs, pick the songs, lead the congregation. All of us had different roles to play. Like George says, you had tent masters, you had all kinds of things that were occurring. But it was an example of my father's commitment to do what God wanted him to do. And he wasn't getting paid for it. This was all voluntary. Many times, of course, he had to go into the family coffers in order to make different things happen during these tent efforts. The point really being, not only was he able to start these churches, but the point is that when you do what God wants you to do, you will be incredibly blessed. You won't just be somewhat blessed. When it talks about giving you pour out a blessing so that you will not be able to receive it, this is what my parents received. Because the most important blessing in my mind in this lifetime is to see your children become successful Christian adults. Okay, your prized creation as a human is a child, and to see them reach levels that in where you grew up, you may not have seen much of or not even considered. I mean, my parents, but they both finished high school, but not really a full college education. My mother eventually got a teaching degree. She could, in those days, if you finished high school, you could start teaching. So she went and got her teaching credentials from Oakwood in the 50s. So my mother was at Oakwood for a summer or however long that period was, to get teaching credentials. And so she was a teacher for some time. Eventually, after we moved north to north of New York, we moved out of New York City and we moved up to the Hudson Valley. She then decided to become a licensed vocational nurse, which is just one level below RN. And she achieved that, you know, as a mid-30s woman. And that is her career that she continued until she retired. And I remember my mother, she used to work the graveyard shift, okay? And that was by design. She worked the graveyard shift so that she could be home in the mornings when her children got ready for school. She could be home when we got home from school. She could make dinner for us. She could tell us to do our homework. And then when we were going to sleep, she would get in a car and drive to work and work for 8 hours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
She would sleep a few hours in the afternoon, and that was the kind of that I saw personally as I was growing up in this family. And there is something about living, breathing role models and examples that make an indelible impression on you. You can't shy away from that. You can't shy away from it because that's all you know. Okay?
In your face.
That's all you know. I mean, I have a father who, you know, he's a Black man who stayed with his wife with 12 kids.
Who
right?
celebrated this? Who celebrated the 70th anniversary?
Destroying Black family. Watched my parents exemplify. I watched them destroy those myths about Black families. And the growing up in that.
Carlton, excuse me.
Yes.
They stayed together for 75 years.
Yes, yes, yes.
So some
Absolutely.
of my siblings are on, and I was not going to leave that out.
They can jump in.
We stayed together for 75 years. When my mother recounted in late years, and my father kind of made a surprise visit because he lived in Northern California and he wasn't here at the time. But he showed up one night, and my mother looks at my wife with a little smile on her face, and she looked over and she said, you know, I've been in love with that man since I was 15 years old. Okay. And my wife just said, wow. And my mother and like I said, my parents stayed together for 75 years. My mother, they reached that milestone, and a few weeks later, my mother passed, unfortunately. You know,
let me add something, Carlton.
Absolutely.
I want to tell a little vignette about Mom and her nursing. The times that she began that nursing, she started out as an aide at the Vassar Brothers Hospital in Poughkeepsie. She was working, this was before she got her nursing license, and she was working that crazy schedule. And but she was so good as an aide that when they were short, she worked the cardiac ward. They would leave her on the ward by herself to take care of those patients. So the nurses kept saying to her, Helen, you have to get your license before we all go to jail because it's illegal for us to leave you here by yourself. So when the program came through Poughkeepsie, and there's a news article that my brother-in-law just pulled recently and shared with the family that was written, that showed my mother as one of the graduates of that nursing program, so that she could legally take care of those patients. And she ended up I think was she head nurse at Victory Lake for a while, Carlton?
No, she was not
Well,
head nurse.
but she was in a supervisory role.
No, she
Uh,
wasn't.
She was, I don't remember. I just know she worked up there at the nursing home at Victory Lake that the conference had put together. Just wanted to get that in.
Yes. So I'm, of course, George and I are going to go back and forth, and we're trying to get that, summarize some of the stuff and pull it together. But that relationship, that south and brought them north and brought them to New York City originally was in the Jim Crow South prior to the changes rights would bring. And that allowed them to do some of the things that they might not have done down in North Carolina. Of course, I'm the ninth child. So for me, my story comes up after 8 other children are already on the scene and doing great things. I mean, right here in front of everybody, of course, everybody thinks of the doctors in the Sampson family. That's nice. But you got to look at my other host here, my co-host, George Sampson. He takes great credit because he let out in terms of college was not an option for him. He was going to college. And probably if life and family was different, he might have gone on and even did you get a master's in anything, George? But
graduate studies in psychology, yeah.
Yeah, so went on to graduate studies. So George literally started a educational pathway, I would like to call it. He started an educational pathway that in our family, it wasn't a question about whether you were going to college. It was just about when and where. It wasn't if. It was the normal. It was going to be the normal process of how you move forward in this family. And the beautiful thing about having an older brother that's, George is 15 years older than me. We don't care about age now because we're both older. So I don't care. He doesn't care. Having an older brother that carries out that educational process and watching the fruits of that process, living, enjoying. My brother bought a home. We used to go to his house for Thanksgiving. We drive down from New York, and he lived in a master plan community and a brand new house. And it seemed like this is a really a good way to change your living conditions is to get an education. So he really started that. And then Paula followed, Jimmy followed, Gwen followed, Reggie followed. We all followed. We all followed in that footstep. To mention something about all of the doctors in the family, there are 6 doctors in the family. Okay. We have 2 nurse PhDs and 4 MDs. And most people know us about that. But the one I'd like to mention, the one that most people don't really know about, and I'm going to tell you that personally for me, the one that I'm the proudest of, is really my sister. And many of you may not know that story. So after it was George, Paula, Jimmy, and Gwen. Now, Gwendolyn went to Pine Forge also. All 12 of us went to Pine Forge, but only 11 of us graduated. Okay. Gwen was a little bit of a rebel. And so at Pine Forge, she went to Pine Forge, and they didn't focus on forgiveness and redemption. They focused on rules and authoritarianism. So Gwen thought she would experiment with cigarettes. She got caught. And they expelled her from Pine Forge, and that's the only reason she didn't graduate from Pine Forge. I tell this story because the family hasn't had this perfect everything exactly. And I tell this story because I really am the most proud of her because George, you can help me with here.
Yes.
Kicked out of Pine Forge, went out, had, became an adult, lived life. I think before she went back, did she have Saba before she went back and got her GED, took the GED?
I would try to find her. See, Reggie went, but she came back to New York when Vernetta got married in '81. And, the family was continuing to go to graduations of other family members. And Gwen was more and more upset. And my mother, who is in her wisdom, I mean, this woman is unique. She says, I don't know why you're upset. She said, if you're upset because other people are getting their degrees and finishing school and you aren't, there's only one person that can do anything about that, and that's you. And so Gwen applied to take her GED. She made one of the highest scores in the history of Nassau County on the GED. So high that when she applied to the university, she won a full scholarship, including living expenses, to the university. She got her bachelor's degree in communications, which was her forte. And then she stayed and got her master's degree in communications. And this was at the school.
It was in journalism, the master's.
Journalism, that's right. What did I say?
You said communication, that's okay. It was
journalism. Yeah, journalism was right. She got her master's degree in journalism. And this was from the premier journalism school in the country or world at that time. And that was Columbia University in New York. So like Carlton, Gwen's story is a story to me that is the most inspiring story of the Sampson family saga. She did this after having a child. And so we're just very proud of that accomplishment that she made. And again, it shows, even though that she was troubled and there were issues, she pushed through and made this thing happen. And in the end, she developed her own. Gwen was one of those people who didn't have an easy time working for people, especially if those people were a little off. And you know how does it work? The boss is really silly or stupid, and Gwen would tell them if they were, which that's not normal. So she ended with her own organization called the African Centric Press, which was a newsletter that she produced in Harlem. She interviewed all the congressmen and the city council people, and she dealt with the issues of what was happening in Harlem. And she loved her people and she loved Harlem. We tried many times to talk. I said, Gwen, with your credentials, you can go down south to HBCU and you can, have a nice life as a professor there. No, can't leave Harlem. Unfortunately, we have lost Gwen. Gwen passed away from cancer in 1999. But her story is one of the most inspiring stories of our family.
Absolutely, and that's why I brought it up. That's the famous story, and I tell people all the time. I go, I have a sister. I was telling some doctors this story a few weeks ago, sitting down in the cafeteria. They were asking me about my family, and I told them, I said, yeah, we got doctors. I said, but the real story is my son. And I said, that to get kicked out of high school and come back 10, 12, I don't know, however many years later, to take the GED, to get a full scholarship to Columbia, and where she preceded President Obama at Columbia, by the way. I go, that's the story. That's the story, honestly, academically, that I'm the most proud of. And it was a remarkable journey that she had. Like George said, we lost Gwen in 1999. It was very difficult for us because, as George said, up until 1999, we had 12 kids everywhere across the country doing all kinds of stuff. And the Lord protected us. We were the Teflon family. We didn't have any deaths. Nobody went to war. Nobody was injured. Nobody went to jail. We were the Teflon family. And to steal George's phrase, eventually this life will catch up with you and will do some damage to you or your family. And unfortunately, Gwen succumbed to advanced cervical cancer. And it was very personal for me because she spent her last months in Glendale, where I was at the hospital, and she actually expired in the hospital where I was on staff. And we had to make some very, very, very difficult decisions during that process. And when you're a physician at a hospital, you have some authority. You can do things that the average person can't do. And with my sister Laval's help, I just had to. We made a decision as a family as to how we were gonna let the process carry out, and we did that. And Gwen passed. Luval and I were together when Gwen passed, and that was our first loss as the Sampson family. I don't know if we're over it yet.
Yeah, we're not. We'll never be over it because we're the kind of family that is always together. I was saying to Carlton when we were talking about doing this, how many families that you know that are as large as ours, anywhere near as large as ours, that every time somebody graduates from kindergarten, well, especially high school, every family member and family shows up for the graduation, no matter where they live in the country. We all come together for it. And I was saying to Carlton that we're a family that gets together. We stay in touch. Most families that have the spread of ages that we have, the oldest child doesn't know the youngest child. I mean, 21 years, I was really out of the house before Sonia was even born. Sonia was born the year I graduated from college. And I found out with a postcard from my parents, you have a new baby sister, Sonia Marie. But we're such a family that comes together all the time. Dad would say, come on, y'all, let's get a picture. Let's get a good picture. We don't know when we'll be like this again. And then 3 months later, come on, we'll get a picture. We never know we're gonna be like this again. So we're always a family that stays in touch, that gets together. And even if we don't, this past year has been really difficult for us as a family because we always get together. And we've slid around the rules a few times and had 1 or 2 things with maybe more than the exact household, but out of respect and out of fear of this bad disease, we have not done it the way we would normally do it. I wanted to add something before I forget it. And you nod your head, Debbie, when we're going too long, because we can talk forever. But I wanted to go back to something about Daddy. My father ran these efforts in these churches and started these churches up again and helped get things going. And I felt like the conference should hire him after he started a church, a couple of churches. I said, wait a minute, you got pastors who were pastors for 40 years, never started a church. So I had a few chats with the powers that be, because I'm the oldest and I knew the conference presidents and stuff. I was in my 40s or 50 something. And I had some conversations about it. And the answer was, well, your dad is too old for us to put him in what they then called the sustenance program. I said, wait a minute now. So you're telling me that you can't give him retirement. So that's why you won't hire him? I said, don't even think about that. So this man has 12 children, doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. You don't have to worry about his retirement. His retirement is going to be fine. Here's a man that's working for the church, bringing people into the church, building churches. And I think that his reward in this life should be that you bring him on as a regular pastor. Now, my father didn't go to Andrews. He didn't go to Oakwood. But as Carlton can attest, his religious library was it was like none I've ever seen. I mean, he had everything. He knew this doctrine upside, downside, backwards, inside out. He knew exactly what he was doing. And eventually, the Northeastern Conference hired my father as a full-fledged pastor without any of those degrees. And they first had him working in the community center, and then that didn't happen. So then they gave him another church. They gave him two churches. Because of his skill, they gave him two churches on Long Island, one in a town called Wyandanch, which if they drop you there and you didn't hear the people talk, you would think you were in Mississippi. It's way out on Long Island in a very poor community. And then they gave him a church in Hempstead that was a storefront. And my dad, again, kept doing efforts. He did major concerts. He called me up one day, son, I'm going to do this concert at some music hall in New York. I got Vanessa Bell Armstrong. I got Clifton Davis. I got Anthony Wiggum. I got, he was telling all these people, I got Wentley's going to sing. I want you to sing. And he was doing all these fundraisers for his churches. This is what he did. This was his life. And, the family, we had to really get on his case about retiring because he started having heart issues. And we were afraid he was going to have a heart attack because, preaching and running tent efforts is very stressful. So we did get him to retire after some conversation with him from it, and said, you can teach young people how to do what you've done. But my father also, both my parents, just remarkable people, again, whose lives were dedicated to Christ, to God, and to educating their children and to being assured that their children grew up in the admonition and knowledge of Jesus Christ. We could go on and on and on. And I'll end the thing about my parents by saying this. One day, one of my sisters, one of the PhD nurses who was dean of the nursing department at Oakwood, a chair of the nursing department at Oakwood, was approached by the development person and asked a question. Has anybody ever honored your parents? And LaBelle said, well, yeah, they've been parents of the year at Pine Forge. They've been parents of the year at Oakwood. So they've been honored. She says, no. She says, I mean, has anybody really honored your parents? And she said, well, no, other than those things, no. I'm here to tell you, and proud to say, that the Oakwood College members, I don't know who made this decision, but it was a group of folk at Oakwood. Might have been from the board, it might have been, I don't know how they do it when they do these things. But they honored both my parents in the year my mother passed with honorary doctorate degrees. So here were two people who did not have all the formal education, but had guided 12 children to all finish high school, to all finish college degrees, and then to go on from there to do graduate studies and other fields and get other degrees, honored them with honorary doctorate degrees. And my mother had developed dementia by then. But as she was sitting on that platform at the church in their little town up north in California, she looked down at it, and I saw a glimmer of a recognition that something important had happened. I don't know exactly how much she took it. She was holding the degree in her hand. They had her gowned and robed, and she looked at it, and I saw like a flicker of, okay, this is something good. Now, within what, 4 months, Carlton, she had passed.
Yeah.
But to me, that was the epitome of honoring two people who had dedicated their lives in this way. And my parents were so good at this that they often were asked to come and do seminars on child rearing, because everybody said, how did you do this? What did you do? What did you do? How did you make this happen? And as the Carlton has said, it was the love of God, the love between the two of them, which withstood all kinds of problems, the love of us as children who love each other. I mean, there's no time that any of us can call any of the other of us with any situation that needs help that we don't respond and make it happen. That's just that's who we are. And that comes from those parents of ours. And that ceremony, they had to go up to state California to do it because my parents were too fragile to travel. So Dr. Pollard and Sherry Wilson came to their church up there to confer those degrees. And then several of us went to Oakwood the following graduation to accept the honor there. So that's kind of a synopsis of who and what we are. And Carlton chime in again, and there are other family members who will correct us if we get something wrong.
I'm not gonna keep us too long, but I do have some other things that I was hoping to share, just
Yeah,
because
go ahead.
there's, we're a family of miracles. I mean, that's what we are. I mean, there are collective family miracles, and then there are individuals lives who had miracles that literally occurred in our lives. I mean, if we take it back a little bit, I know we've gone back and forth in time, but hopefully you've been able to follow us. If you go back to my parents coming to New York, huge decision, just moving up there, not with jobs, just on faith, creating a life there, and then deciding that even New York City wasn't the best for the family, and moving us further north, which is 70, 85. Poughkeepsie's 85 miles north of New York City, but we had a few stops along the way, and of course, life throws at you all kinds of challenges. The family has suffered two significant fires. I think one was in Kingston. George, you know a little bit more about that because I think I was a child. The reason the fire stands out in my mind is the family stories. I don't even recall what I did. So there was a fire in a house or an apartment, in Kingston, and as the story goes, as they're leaving the house and they got all the kids in the car and the place is burning, and we were so poor then that anything new was a big deal. So my mother was like, "Oh no, uh, we left Carlton's new pants in the house." And the story goes that I said, "No, we didn't, Mama. I got
I
my
got
pants."
I'm
So
gonna let
we were not wealthy by any means. We were lower middle class, and every new thing we got was precious because remember, I'm the ninth child, so most of my wardrobe was what, hand me downs. Okay, it was handed down from George on down. So when something new showed up, it was very, very precious. And I guess I don't know how old I was, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. I don't even know how old I was, George. But this was a fire that we had that we survived and had to move. And I don't know if that prompted us moving to Poughkeepsie, or that was just we moved from there to another home in Kingston. Um, but anyway, the two fires, that was the one fire. Then we had another fire, and we were living in Poughkeepsie. And this fire I recall very well because I think I was 7 or 8. I don't know exactly how old I was, but we were living in a second story apartment. We got to tell you a few of these stories. And this second story apartment, I don't know if I I don't know if I want to call it the haunted or the cursed apartment, or it was the apartment that God wanted to demonstrate His blessings in, because there was two tragedies that occurred in this apartment. So this is a second story apartment. We live on the second story. Of course, it's not the regulations that properties have now. In the back of this apartment was a very small porch. And you could walk onto this porch and it had a railing, but the railing, it didn't have any balustrades. So it was a railing and the bottom of the railing is wide open to you could just walk off of it. If you weren't tall enough to reach the railing or you fell, you just fall right down. So one of the tragedies that occurred at this apartment, which turned into a miracle, is my little brother Michael fell off of that porch. He fell off the second story porch. I don't know, was he 2 or 3? I don't know. He fell on a slate slab on his head. Not only did he live, which was a surprise, not only did he live, but he actually still had some brains left and ended up getting a master's later on in life in finance. Okay, so that was the one miracle in that apartment. The next miracle in that apartment was we had a fire, and we had a very significant fire. And this fire occurred while my father, who was preparing to pick up my mother from work, and he was preparing to pick up my mother from work, and his car wouldn't start. So he had to go to a friend's house, which was basically across a park. There's a park, and a friend lived on the other side of this expanse of a park to get some help to get his car. Because one of the other things that no Sampsons are really handy with automobiles. It's one of the reasons why I became a doctor. Go. Getting under the car with my father was a nightmare. We'd get under the car and try to fix something. We'd always have to get a mechanic. But anyway, Daddy, back to the story, Daddy had to go over and get something. During that time, unfortunately, a fire broke out in our apartment. My youngest sister, Sonia, was there sleeping. The rest of us, I was downstairs in a friend's apartment. My other two siblings got out, and this fire broke out, and Sonia was sleeping on a bed in one of the rooms.
She was an infant.
Yeah, what's that?
She was an infant. She was small, a baby.
Was she under a year, I think?
Yeah.
Yes, she wasn't a year old. And the fire was going. I couldn't go up, and all of us were afraid. So the firemen come to this fire, and they determine that it's too dangerous to go up. That's how the blaze is. Of course, you got to remember the time. This is New York, but this is still, all the firemen are white. This is a black family in a black neighborhood with a black fire. Nobody's going to risk themselves for a black child. So I watched my father become a superhero that night. My father looked at the firemen and he said, if you're not going to go up there and get my daughter, I'm going up there to get my daughter. They attempted to actually hold him back from going. He basically broke them off. He went up the stairs that were burning, and he took my less than 1-year-old daughter, sister Sonia, took her out of that fire, which she would have expired in that fire. She came down with 3rd, 4th degree burns on a significant part of her body, and they didn't know if she was even going to survive once they got her to the hospital. And that was one night when a young black son saw a black superhero, and I will always give Daddy credit for that. Incredible. So that's a miracle. But still, we had 2 disasters there, but they both turned out. That relationship between God and my family turned into miracles. Sonia survived that, and you all know Sonia today. And of course, she's completed her education and is a successful adult now today. So these are things that have molded our family. We've seen God move in ways that not everybody has an opportunity to tangibly feel. We moved to Poughkeepsie at a time. The timing of us moving to Poughkeepsie is incredible. It's otherworldly. At the time, Poughkeepsie was the Silicon Valley of the 70s. There was one technology company in the world, really, and it was IBM. And IBM was headquartered in Poughkeepsie. Now, that may not seem like it has any impact, but the real impact of that is that Poughkeepsie was highly educated people, highly progressive, and they had money. Money. The city had money. What that meant for us as a young black family was that there was always work in Poughkeepsie. When I turned 13, I went down to the city hall and I got my Social Security card. That, as a young black person, that's all you needed in Poughkeepsie to get a job, was your Social Security card. Once I got that Social Security card, there was never a time in Poughkeepsie, if I wanted a job, that I could not find one and actually get one and get paid. They had an incredible commitment to the city during the summers. Any teenager that wanted to work, you just showed your card, and they had work programs for every single person The only people that didn't work is the ones that didn't want to work. So the summers were spent working. You could work at the park, you could work as maintenance. You were productive. The reason this becomes somewhat important in the Sampson story is that we all worked. So when we all worked during the summer, those are some of the things that helped us be able to afford getting into Pine Forge when the time came for us to go to Pine Forge. So we worked. My parents put in what they could. We got enough to get to register, and then we worked while we're at Pine Forge and worked our way, because Pine Forge had a work study program that allowed the students to work and go to school, which worked perfect for us who could have never afforded to go to Pine Forge if that did not exist. And as George mentioned, I personally have had a unique experience. And that experience, he mentioned, one of the parts of that experience was I worked all summer, and when I went to Pine Forge, but let me pause there just for a second. I got to go before I went to Pine Forge. And not only me, but all of my siblings, when someone needed to get into a school to get registered and they needed money, and my parents for sure didn't have the total amount, every sibling in my family would offer what they had saved, what they had earned personally over the summer or over the year. They would offer it up and say, I have 100, I have 200, and they would give it to the other sibling so that they could get registered at Pine Forge. And so when I say that this story is a story about the love between Mary Helen and George, the love between God and us, and the love between each of us, every Sampson can take credit, tangible credit, for contributing to another sibling's success. And it's just so happened when I went to Pine Forge, it was actually the Pine Forge Alumni Association came up with this scholarship the night before I arrived, not knowing anything. So I have my registry money to get into Pine Forge, and I get there and they go, oh, guess what? The Pine Forge Alumni Association has decided that the next Sampson that comes in is gonna get a $800 a year, which doesn't sound like a lot now, but this is 1975, and that was almost a year's tuition. Okay, is going to get an $800 scholarship, and that just happened to be me. I just happened to be in that timing. And like George said, my family came down to drop me off at Pine Forge. Renee was just on there for the ride, and next thing she knows, she's being offered to stay. Hasn't brought any clothes, hasn't done anything. My mother is not really prepared to let her go. Renee is like her ace at the house and helping her cook. My mother is just taking a big sigh, like, I want you to stay, but I want you to be with me at home too. But how can I take this opportunity from you? So I saw my mother struggle, but she said, Renee, if you want to stay, you can stay. So George's wife and Jimmy's wife, they went to I think it was Kmart back in those days, bought her some stuff so she could stay. And so Renee and I started Pine Forge together. And this is just a miracle that no one can predict. It's just such a blessing that only God can orchestrate. And this is what he's done for us, he's done for me, and he's done for many of us. We all ended up going to Pine Forge. Only one did not graduate. I don't know, 7 or 8 of us went to Oakwood. When I was at Pine Forge, speaking of the educational part of it, I have to touch on this a little bit. George started it, and then Reggie decided, George was at 100 miles an hour, and then Reggie decided to try on 120, just to take it up into that next gear. And I can't tell you the impact of having a brother finish medical school when you're in high school. I mean, it's a pathway that says, if he can do it, you can do it. And by him doing it, Alan, who was on the same path, realized he could do it. Vernetta said, I can do it. Luval and Renee both said, whatever we decide to do, we can do it. Mike and Sonia knew that, hey, all I got to do is decide what I like and what I want, and I can do it. So these are blessings that that really propelled us to attempt difficult things. And when you have the right kind of role models, and then you see the results of their efforts and their trust in God, the sky is the limit. So like I said, we've been talking enough. We have enough stories. We can tell you story after miracle. And all I can say is that for me personally, the greatest blessing was me being born to George and Mary Helen Sampson. That's the greatest blessing in my life, and thank God for it. They taught me love. They taught me to love God. They taught me to love each other, and that is what's carried our family. So our family is truly, the story of our family is truly a love story.
Amen.
Excuse me. It has been such a delight to hear you both, and I think I heard a couple of other siblings chime in and share. And out of curiosity, how many other siblings are on? I know I heard Paula, and I think I saw Paula.
I'm Laval. I'm on.
Okay, Laval and Paula. Anybody else? It's so
Let
good
us show you Dad. Dad is here. Let me.
Yeah, I heard that. I thought I heard him.
So we can see Dad. He's here.
I heard him. Yeah.
And how old is he now?
Dad's 96.
He'll be
96.
in
And
July.
so at your good afternoon, Elder Sampson, what do you say about this tribe that you have? You could have named them just like they did the 12 tribes of Israel. What do you say about this tribe?
Well, they made me very proud.
Amen.
Made me very proud. They sort of what we were trying to do, give them a good education, and they followed through. And I want all of them to know that we appreciate each one of them.
Amen.
Each and every one of them. Love you. God bless you. Continue to do good work.
Amen. Amen, Dad.
What's your best advice for a young man today who's growing up with so much civil unrest, the dissension in the church and out of the church, and all of these different things that are happening? What is your best advice, Elder Sampson, for a young African-American man today in New York? What would you tell him?
You mean my father, right?
Yes, Elder
Pastor
Sampson Senior.
Pastor Sampson?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you have to make a decision. Decide what you want to do, and go for it. When you go for it, it's going to happen. If you don't go for it, it's not going to happen. So my admonition, any young people that want to do anything, have a desire to do, whatever you desire to do, make sure it's a good thing. Go for it.
I appreciate that. One more question for you, Pastor Sampson. What's your best advice for a man that's trying to get a woman's attention since they can't write? Well, I guess they could write a letter. You wrote a letter and it worked. But
Advice
what's
for
your best advice?
a woman's attention.
You said go for it.
Well, just as he said, you got to do whatever attracts her to you. So you'd have to display those positions. Display to her those positions that he likes. She likes. That's right there. Just do the best I could, and the Lord bless. That's all.
Amen. Amen. Elder George Sampson or Paula, how many generations are there now?
Yes.
What is it? Four? No. What? Five? Five.
It should be 5.
Yeah, 5.
Wow.
Dad, our generation, our children.
And then there,
Let's use Jimmy, Milana for an example.
Jimmy and Ann.
Daddy, Jimmy, Stacy, Milana, and Harper. So
Right.
there's five generations that are with us. Because my great niece just had a baby this month, and so there are five generations living like with Dad. It's a miracle.
One final question, and I'm sure maybe our group would want to take on, or we'll check in with our audio video person. Has the family had someone at Oakwood every year, every generation, every 5 years, or someone at Pine Forge?
There was a period of time when there was someone at Oakwood. I will be blatantly honest and confess that I started Oakwood College in 1961. And from 61 through the time Sonia graduated, I think in 82, was that 82? Alton, about right?
85 for Sonia.
83.
85? 83? Yeah, no. Anyway, there was somebody there. Anybody that went to Oakwood during those years knows a Sampson, personally, from having met them at Oakwood. At Pine Forge, it was a shorter period, but then the Grands started to come. So the 12 of us went to Pine Forge, and then the year Sonia graduated, I think Colin came the following year, and then Stacy, and then my son, and then my daughter, and then there was a few years when there was nobody there, and then more of the grandchildren went to Pine Forge. So
Miguel was there too.
Regella, that's right, Colin, yeah. And so what, about 30 kids went to Pine Forge in the family? Paul, is that the number? About
32.
32 went to Pine Forge. I knew somebody was keeping up with that. And I don't remember the actual number with the Grands that went to Oakwood. I've never calculated that, but a lot. 11, by the way, Carlton, 11 attended Pine Forge.
Oh, okay.
But all didn't graduate from Oakwood. 11 attended Oakwood, but didn't all graduate. I didn't graduate from Oakwood, and Paula didn't graduate from Oakwood. We did graduate, but not from Oakwood. But 11 actually started. Michael went for a year, and this and that and the other for a while. But the legacy is long-standing, and we hope to continue. I hope that the influence of the family will always be positive, and that it will always be an example for anybody, as I said at the beginning, who feels that they can't accomplish something. You can always accomplish it if you have that magic formula of love for God, love for each other, love for family, love for your fellow man, and obedience to God's will. Those things will end you in success.
And any questions from those of you who have stayed by listening? I know there's a couple of other things, and we'll check in with our AV person to see if we're going to be connected. But any questions or comments, remarks from our audience that's been listening so graciously this afternoon?
Hello. I would like to make a comment. Is that Elder Benjamin that's talking?
Yes, I was going to say a quick thing here.
Okay.
I don't know, but when I was a teenager, for some reason, my desire was to have 12 kids. But whether or not the good Lord, my head wasn't good, straight enough or whatnot, I didn't make it at all. But God has still been good. So, I have this admiration for Pastor Sampson, which is one of the reasons, Brother George, you and I, we
Yes.
click, because
Yes,
I
we do.
understand that was a man, a real man.
Yeah.
Only a real man with the help of God can do that. You see?
Yes.
And there is so much benefits. My siblings, there were basically 4 of us that were born and raised together in the same house, etc., etc. But even to this day, our relationship is so tight.
Mhm.
Man, it's a joy. It's a joy. It's a joy. So I understand, and I can relate to all that was saying, and some of the stuff Doc was saying, Doc Carlton was saying there, man, you know, brought back a lot of
They're
memories.
asking
in my
questions.
mind, you know. So praise God, man.
So
God bless you, Pastor Sampson. You are definitely a man that was blessed, not just blessed, but highly favored of God.
Amen.
Praise the Lord for you, man.
Amen. Amen.
I think
Hello.
Dr. Rochelle, go ahead.
Yes. So I'm looking a little crazy today, so I'm not going to come on.
Come
But
on,
I had
let me see
no,
you.
leave me alone, Carl. To see he already started. But I had
Rochelle, Pastor Brown recognized your voice. He
hey,
says, "That's
hey,
Rochelle."
Miss Carl. See, this is like they're kind of like my family. They took in a stray. I'm the stray. Um, but this family is just very okay. Hey, Pastor Brown, that's my pastor and first lady. They're my pastor and first lady 2 times. I think I've met everybody in the family with the exception of Gwen and Lou Val. But this family is so special because even though they're very educated and it kind of throws you off because they're so down to earth. They're definitely a reflection of their parents, and they will help out any and everybody that they can, which is, I think, is so special because instead of them just saying, I'm just going to help out my family, they extend their gifts and their love to other people. I remember hearing one of them talk about how when they were growing up, they kind of grew up in groups of 4. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
That they
correct.
grew up in groups of 4. And so when some of the older ones were at Pine Forge or at Oakwood, the younger ones, it was such a joy for them to see their siblings. A lot of times you see in big families, you know, people talk about, well, I had to rush and get some food so I wouldn't have, you know, wouldn't be without food, or there's competition, or they're complaining about hand-me-downs. But you never heard anything like that with them. It was all about being connected, being loving each other, the older ones helping the younger ones out financially and so forth. And so it's just been a blessing. So I had to come on today just to say those things and to say a special shout out to Carlton. He was my mentor. And what I liked about him is the same thing. He would help out anybody that he could. So I just really appreciate everybody. I want to say hi to Papa Sampson. Hey, Daddy. Happy 96th birthday. And then I also want to acknowledge Dr. Evelyn Thomas as well. But God bless you guys. Keep doing what you do. And I love you. And Pam Bechet says hi, Carlton.
Hey, Pam, how are you?
Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to say something to the Sampson family. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Miriam.
I just have been so blessed to know the Sampson family. I guess in a way we're kind of close, but I wanted to share that I visited their home when I was attending Pine Forge. I've gone to Pine Forge with Sampsons, Oakwood with Sampsons, and then taught Sampsons at Pine Forge. So I've kind of gone around the circle with them, but I remember vividly visiting their home one summer. Vernetta and I were friends, and she had a group of us to come up there, and it was amazing. The kitchen was like a cafeteria. I mean, Sister Sampson had that thing so organized, and everybody knew what they were supposed to do. It was a wonderful weekend. We just felt like we were part of the family. I think about 4 or 5 of us came. There were already several children at the home still, but Vernetta brought all of us there. So they were so sharing, and it was such a wonderful time. And I think one told me that Sister Sampson kept a picture that we had taken that weekend on her mantle, because every time I would see Sister Sampson, she would know who I was, and I'd be like shocked. How could she remember me from that one visit? But that's just how just a loving family, a wonderful loving family. So I was just happy to even have experienced being with the Sampsons at Pine Forge and Oakwood and back at Pine Forge again. Love you guys. You're wonderful.
Love you, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Anyone else?
This is Larry Word. And I had the opportunity of attending Oakwood with Alan and Reggie. Alan was my roommate. My suite mate at Oakwood. And my sister, Shirley Word, she knows you very well, Carlton.
Yeah.
So I can just say that I enjoyed the friendship with mostly Alan because he was my sweet mate. And the thing I enjoyed most about the Sampson family was that they loved to sing. Oh my goodness. And just we would form a quartet right in the suite, and me and Alan and some of the other guys would just start singing those songs like "Good Night, Dear Lord," I see you in the morning. So we just had a good time, and I had the opportunity to be treasurer for the Northeastern Conference. That's where I met your dad. How you doing, Elder Sampson? This is Larry Word.
Yes, thank you.
And he had become a lay pastor there. He was so kind and so nice, but he ran a tight ship. And one day in the lobby of the conference office, a guy came through with some tie clamps and the pearls and things that you put on cufflinks and things like that. And I said, Elder Sampson, they look very nice. He was looking at them real close, and he said, but I'm on a fixed income. I said, Elder Sampson, I enjoyed your family so much. Just pick out what you want. I'll pay for it.
Right.
So this is just my impression of the Sampson family. I was there with Vanetta too. So it's just such a nice family, and I'm just glad to hear the rest of the story. So hopefully, Elder Sampson, you have a happy birthday, and to the rest of the family, George. I met you over in San Diego.
Yes.
And just know that I love the family, and that you all keep on doing what the Lord tells you to do.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to say hi to the Sampsons as well. This is Jocelyn Parker Price speaking, Joni Rochelle's older sister. But I don't know all the Sampsons collectively, but I had the privilege of being a friend of your brother, your oldest brother, and Jimmy. And as well as I was present at the birth of Brigella and first child. We were there and took part in that. And it's so nice, Pastor Sampson, to see that you're there live and well, and happy birthday. And listening to you guys' story was just wonderful. And when you guys say miracles, you're not kidding. I didn't know the whole story, but it was wonderful. George, your family, Carlton, your family, it was a blessing today, Saturday afternoon, to hear that uniqueness of how valuable family is and how you should value your family, and that how you can lean on one another. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And I just wanted to say to you guys, it was just fantastic to hear the story.
Thank you.
Dad's birthday will be July 8th, and he will be 97 years old at that time.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Praise God.
Thank you.
Really, we are overwhelmingly blessed. We can't help but share. It's like when your cup overflows, it's gonna spill. And so that's really the story of our family. Is we've been incredibly blessed. We almost can't contain it, to be honest with you. So it's our privilege to share that blessing with anyone, really. And
we've always shared, and there's always a group of young people who want to name themselves as the 13th Sampson. We have several very good friends, and they argue among themselves which one of them is next in line to be a member of the Sampson family. Because as somebody mentioned, our house could be full of people. All 12 of us could be home in the summer, and my parents would still bring somebody else home to eat. And there was never any running out of food or not enough. There have been times when there were people who needed a place to live. And well, the Sampsons got that big old house on Mansion Street. Surely they got one room that you can use. And so my parents would take people in until they got back on their feet. And it just was an example that really Christ left us when he was here, that you show this kind of love to one another. That is what he asked us to do. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, your neighbor as yourself. That's what he's asked us to do. And that's what we should do.
This is Alfonso Small, Pastor. I go back many years with your oldest son, George, back in New York. I remember coming up to Victory Lake Camp with a bunch of us from City Tabernacle in New York. And we would be up there for Youth Day or something like that. And I remember your wife having us over for cookies and stuff like that at the house. But I didn't get a chance to meet all of the siblings and the children. But today's story was very, very inspiring. I see your picture, Paula. Long time no see.
Yes, Alfonso, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm hiding my face so you don't see how bad the wrinkles are. But Elder, it's good to see you're still alive and kicking, and your face have not changed. I cannot believe that. Whatever miracle drug you're using on your face, please share it with the rest of us.
Thank you very much.
I know the family has been through a lot, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least make mention of what we, extended church family, observed when Dr. Reggie became sick. How we observed your commitment and how you rallied together. Give us an update on Dr. Reggie now.
All right. Well, like you said, unfortunately, our family has had some tragedy. We've lost two of our siblings, Gwen in '99, and we lost our brother, James, in 2013. We lost our nephew in 2014. In 2017, unfortunately, Reggie, who was absolutely the fittest one of us, without question. Reggie had run over 100 marathons. He used to jog 20 miles a week. He was actually on the basketball court playing basketball, and he suffered a stroke. He suffered what we call a hemorrhagic stroke, where you actually get bleeding into the brain. He survived that. Thank God he survived that. And over the last 3 years, he has been clawing his way back to becoming more of himself. I saw him as recently as last Sabbath there. I was at his home. He was on the phone with Alan earlier, and he said, "Who's coming by to visit today?" So he's got a long way to go, but he's still in the fight. He has left-sided weakness from his stroke. His speech is not perfect, but he is improving gradually. Of course, the pandemic last year was a big blow to his recovery because the inability to go to his usual rehab locations. And so that required him to be at home. There was a period of time when the home health wouldn't even come. So despite these challenges and setbacks, Reggie still exists, and he still has some fight and still has some plans to improve. And we still have some prayers and some hopes that he will even improve more. But he can have a conversation with you. He's able to feed himself. He's able to do some things that would be surprising with someone who suffered the injury that he suffered. Since I'm a doctor, I'm just going to tell you this. If you take 3 pieces of paper and put them together, that's how close he was to not surviving the original stroke. That much more bleeding he would not be here with us. So it occurred in a place where he was close enough to get help fast enough to make a difference. And so, as long as you're here and as long as you know the man upstairs, and you always got a chance to recover. So that's it.
Amen. Amen. You've taught us a lot today. And as I said in my opening remarks, the institution of a family before sin one of God's fingerprints himself that he entrusted to us, the marriage and that family unit. And we want to thank you for being such a wonderful example of what a family looks like when they keep God first. That was what was introduced in my tagline. What it looks like when God is at the forefront, what it looks like when the patriarch of the family leads out by example of, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And it seems as though the men that follow in his footsteps, Pastor Sampson, those who bear his last name and share a likeness with him, have done one of the same. And for that, we can say thank you. Thank you for joining us once again. It has been so nice to have this time of fellowship with you. May the Lord bless and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and grant you and yours peace. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. For more information about this program, This Is My Story, Testimonies That Move the Soul, see us at our website. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.